Hello, everyone. Taking a moment as everybody joins. Since we're at the top of the hour, I'm going to get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Alina Vaisnan. I work on the Community Initiatives team at the Canadian Women's Foundation. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, Fundraising for Collective Action. We're so happy you're here. Please know that today's webinar is being recorded and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that the work of the Canadian Women's Foundation and the organizations we support takes place on the traditional territory of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. We're so grateful for the opportunity to meet and to work on this land, but we would like to recognize that land acknowledgements like this one are not enough. In all that we do in our work, we should make sure that we pursue truth, reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship in an ongoing, continuous effort to make right with our relations. So welcome and some technical details. If you haven't already, please click the interpretation option at the bottom of your screen and select your language channel because we have interpreters working today to make sure that there's simultaneous translation. So select English or French to make sure that your experience is seamless. There's captioning available today. Please turn that on should you need to by using the CC block along your toolbar, pressing the up arrow and selecting Show Subtitles. If you'd like to access the French captioning, please use the link that I'm dropping into the chat box right now. We'll be taking audience Q&As today at the end of the presentation, so please go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. As with all online meetings, if we have tech issues, be patient with us. We'll do our best to resolve them as soon as possible. And my final technical note is that at the end of the webinar, there is a survey available. Please give us your feedback. We so appreciate it. So today, let's talk about fundraising. Our discussion today is that we hope to engage in a chat about harnessing funds from donors that will contribute to the broad systems change in the gender justice movement that we're all working on. Speaking with us today are, I'm so excited to introduce two speakers that do some amazing work at the foundation. They're constantly speaking within our team and within our wider network about collective action, the movement towards gender justice, and how we can fundraise to fund this vital work. They are creative, they're driven, and I'm so lucky to work with them at the Canadian Women's Foundation. We have Andrea Gunraj, our Vice President of Public Engagement. She leads her team to make sure the Foundation's vision of Canada, where gender equity is realized for all women and girls, is tirelessly pursued. And we have Suzanne Duncan, our Vice President of Philanthropy. She leads a team that makes sure that we have the resources to continue our work. She's always strategizing ways to generate philanthropic contributions that support the achievement of gender equity and to provide strong stewardship to all of our donors and supporters. So with that, I say welcome and thank you so much to Suzanne and Andrea.
Hello, everyone. So thrilled to be here. I know that I'm speaking for myself and my colleague, Suzanne, and I just want to thank you so much for asking for this topic. Sometimes this is a bit of a challenging one, and I'm really glad that you're interested in learning a little more from our perspectives. And I also want to thank our interpreters, our closed captioners, and of course, our wonderful colleagues at the Foundation who have made this happen. So we're going to talk about fundraising success, a conversation on how to create a sustainable store of revenue and supporters. And I think that we have to position this as a bit of a grab bag of things that we think are really important. It's not everything you need to know, and it's not everything that is important, but I think it's an intro of some high level things. I want to also stress that Suzanne and I, we don't know everything. Your expertise here is super valuable. And so I hope that it helps in some way to give you some things that you can mull over and integrate as you see fit into your mandate, into your work. Please, of course, as was mentioned, add any questions in the chat, in the Q&A, and hopefully we'll get to it. We're hoping to spend about a half hour, no more than that, talking at you, and we hope to have a conversation and get an opportunity to actually hear more specifically about what you do and what you're looking to do. So I'm going to pass it on to Suzanne. You go ahead and we'll go back and forth a bit. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. I am so delighted to be here today to talk about one of my favorite things, which is fundraising for social change. And as we go through today's conversation, I wanted to set us up just to think a little bit about how fundraising fits into the overall landscape of Canada, and to help us all feel confident that fundraising is something that's okay to do, because I know it's not something everybody loves. But it's really important for us to realize that there are so many charities in Canada, and together we form a backbone and a huge economic engine. Our sector, which includes organizations like ours, hospitals, universities, private schools, zoos, all sorts of things. Overall, we employ more than 1.3 million people in Canada, and we're responsible for 1 in 11 jobs. It actually means that the charitable sector is providing annual revenue in Canada that's bigger than the GDP of British Columbia. And I say this because I want us to feel confident in the work that we do and the value that we're bringing to our society, to our cultures, to our communities. Because lots of people out there don't know very much about fundraising or about charities, but it's very important for us to speak from that position of confidence, to speak from that position of understanding how valuable we are, so that as we are attracting people to our cause, as we're talking about raising money, we're doing that from a position of strength and confidence, and that allows our values to really shine through. So I just have some stats up here that are important for us to think about as we talk about fundraising. 84% of Canadians donate. That is according to the Canada Revenue Agency. So that's the people who are asking for tax receipts. So you can imagine that it's actually a much larger amount of Canadians. We're one of the most generous countries on the planet. And generally our annual gifts are about $446, and it relates to about $10 billion donated by Canadians annually. And that's a lot of money, but you'll see my little sarcastic comment over here, which is that 10 billion is a lot, but there's still a lot of money in Canada that's going to other things, like $22 billion going to alcohol and tobacco, close to $10 billion going to lotteries. We should have no reserve in asking people to donate and asking people to support things they believe in and that they share values with, because folks have a lot of funds that they could put towards anything, including lotteries, including other things. And we want fundraising and their contribution to the community to be just as important and just as valuable. So I say all of that, but I need to acknowledge sort of the elephant in the room here. We know that not everybody receives the same amount of fundraising revenue, and that the smaller you are, the less likely you are to have fundraising revenue. And the bigger you are, like a big university or a big hospital, the more likely you are to attract more gifts. And this is something I want to bring up because I think it is very important to the gender sector to claim space and to claim as much territory as we can, and to be as professional and as driven to raise money, because the work that we do matters just as much as hospitals, universities, and other community supports. And we need to be unapologetic about asking for what we need and asking folks in Canada to support that work. This is something that I think is really important for everyone to think about, which is where does money come from when it's being donated? And I think a lot of people assume that most money is coming from corporations because corporations make a big deal about it when they're making gifts. They're very public, they have websites, they're able to share that information. But really, about 73% of all gifts going to organizations are coming from people like you and me. They're coming from individuals. And then about 8% of gifts are coming from individuals as they leave a will, as they pass and give gifts to organizations that they believe in. And then another group is 14%. This is foundations, which are generally set up by individuals. So it's just good to be thinking about as we think about fundraising strategies. We often think about corporations and how they can support, and that's a great idea. But it's also important to remember that it's primarily individuals who are really driving change in society by supporting organizations. I'll just tell you a little fundraising joke. We like to say, bequests is 8%, that people who die actually make more gifts to charities than corporations. So, it's just something to keep in perspective as we move through this. But I also recognize that asking people asking people in your community, asking individuals to give is also some of the scariest stuff to do because it's those relationships that you have that you're relying on. So I want to just acknowledge that tension as we move through this. A lot of the strategies we're going to talk about are very focused on individuals, and we know that that can be an uncomfortable thing. So we're hoping that we can use this session to normalize that and make that feel more comfortable. So the big thing is, why do people give? And there's lots of different reasons. Lots of people give because they see a need in the community that they want to support. Lots of people give because they felt the impact of a charity firsthand, or they've seen that impact. Some people give because they want to give back. They want to pay it forward. But really a good way to think about it is they're looking for organizations that share their values. They're looking for organizations that want to solve a problem in the world the same way that that individual wants to solve a problem in the world. So that's that values piece. And a good analogy is food scarcity. So there's lots of different ways that we can address food scarcity and food insecurity in the world. We could give to a local food bank. We could cook for neighbors on our street. We could support an organization that's working on policy change locally, internationally. All of those things are good solutions. What we're trying to do is match the solution that our organization has with the values of the people who share that same desire. So that's the values piece. We'll talk a lot more about this today. In particular, Andrea will talk more about this piece. Then you also need to trust that organization. You can share all the values in the world, but if you don't believe that that organization is the one that's doing good work in this, it's much more challenging to secure a gift. So that trust piece is very important, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And I'll tell you, all the trust and all the value sharing don't mean anything if we don't actually ask. Very, very, very few people will give unprompted. So very few people will see something in the newspaper and decide to make a gift. What they need is somebody to actually say, we need your support, we need you. This is some stuff to think about, and as Alina mentioned in the chat and Leva mentioned in the chat, we will share this deck out. But this is just some good things to think about where you look for donors. The most useful place to look for a donor is the people who are already giving to you or are very connected. And I know that sounds a bit counterintuitive, but if you think about the people who already expressed that they value you by giving their time, by giving their talent, by volunteering, by being on the board, by making gifts, those are the people who are most likely to support you in the future and bring more people to the table to support you. Then as you move out through this target, you start to see other folks that you could look towards but you can really look towards them once you've made sure that the folks that are closest to you are giving at the level that makes sense for them. And that could be a monthly gift of $5. That could be a larger gift, but you want to bring that closest group together first so that they can help build that momentum. Over in the corner of this slide, I also have the linkage ability interest little thing to think about. These are the things that we think about in fundraising as the cornerstone of how to connect with a donor. They need to be interested in the work that you do. They need to have the ability to give. And most importantly, you need to know how to reach them and how to be linked to them. And that's a really good lens to use as you're thinking about people who could support you, is how do we make sure that they have the interest? Could we be sending them newsletters? Could we be sharing some information with them? How can we research what their ability is to give, how much they might be able to support? And we can do that through looking at donor lists of similar organizations or other organizations in your community. And then we think about how can we reach them? How can we link to them to tell them about the fabulous work that we're doing and how their support can help drive even more change. So Andrea, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thanks for that overview of just those kinds of nuts and bolts. And I'm going to add a little bit more by way of nuts and bolts from a story perspective. I think really fundraising does go down to story, like everything in our world goes to story. Lots of people talk about how as individuals and as communities, we are wired for story. And story is the way that we communicate with each other. It's always the underlying basis of how we live our lives and communicate on a day-to-day basis. I do believe that what Suzanne was talking about, the asking, the trust, the values, those are all crucial elements of the stories we believe and we tell about ourselves and others by whatever means. So I don't want to make it seem that it's all written storytelling. Storytelling can happen orally. It can happen through video. It can happen just through day-to-day interactions. It's just however you frame out your day and frame out yourself and frame out other people. So I believe that the best asks and values and trust building work that leads to donations or any action enables people to somehow tell a story about themselves. So that's what the screen is about. My giving is essential because I care about this, because I'm the type of person who, I belong to a family or community that, and I know this issue is important because if this is the kind of thing that you can answer in the way that you communicate about your asks, your values, your trust building, you'll have a more successful action taking, whether that be a donation action or something else. Now, I'd like to say two caveats: that it's not going to work with everyone. There are going to be particular people who care about the type of story you tell and the type of story that you enable them to tell about themselves. Identify who that is. For, of course, gender justice work broadly, that's going to be people who care about gender justice. I think that's often people who are impacted by gender injustice. And of course, the story and the relationships always go hand in hand. So it's not just, this individual thing, what Suzanne is saying around making sure that people are asking other people and there's a relationship between them is very important there too, because we create story together. And so you've got to think through, who are those relationships? Who's the best people to be telling and sharing this story you're giving? So when you're telling a story, say on email or just a face-to-face or doing a presentation, and you're speaking to the work that you're doing, impact, action, the problem, the solution, are you creating the opportunity for people to see themselves as part of this narrative? That's important to do. Perhaps it's not even articulated at all, or maybe things are presumed about it. Can't assume things. You have to kind of take those steps back and think, okay, is everything being articulated that people can then see themselves? And I think as well too, nowadays in particular, we have to think about, are the stories changing from before? Does it need to change? Perhaps a lot of people have been discovering in some ways new things around gender injustice, about racial injustice, about reconciliation and truth and decolonization. So people are starting to question the stories, and that's a great thing. That's a thing that you can absolutely be a part of and help change the narrative. Do that in the ways that make sense for your mandate. And of course, this starts to go far beyond marketing and messaging and fundraising. And I think it speaks to our theory of change. What is the work that you're doing changing? How are you intervening in something harmful? Maybe something that's been harmful for forever. And where does everyone who's involved fit in it? I think it's hard to do these things in isolation. I think it's great to articulate it in a strategic planning process so everybody gets the story and you know what you do and why you do it. And I think it's important then to plan to go there if you need to. This is probably something we all need to do now. The stories we've told about ourselves, about charity and its value in social and gender justice work is worth a re-examination and a re-articulation when it comes to power dynamics, when it comes to changing the status quo. So yeah, planning to go there is a great thing, especially at this time. So we'll go to the next slide. I'll mention that story, of course, as I mentioned, can be oral, written, video, whatever. So that's that first piece there. You see the little pen, but it doesn't have to be a pen. And that story of impact, action, need, solution, it's got to touch the heart first, I believe. And there's lots of evidence out there that says that people act with their heart and then their head justifies it after the fact. Great. So go for the heart first, and then the facts and figures can come in. If you even really need to go there too heavily, usually you don't want to spend too much time there. And of course, this can get tricky, but I believe that there's organizations and causes that are doing this very well, and you can look at what they're doing and see how you can fit in your work in that. And we'll go to the next slide. You know, any of these things, these can be a whole webinar in and of themselves, so I'm going super fast. Types of fundraising and storytelling do have a relationship to each other. So the strength of the storytelling has to go up as you think about the more effective ways of doing things. So when it's media coverage, where it's advertising, perhaps the strength of storytelling in that process is not going to be as strong as when you go all the way up to the change, the face-to-face and between peers kind of work. That's where the storytelling really comes together in a beautiful way and moves people to action. So I'll pass it on to Suzanne. She's going to talk more about the fundraising piece of this.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrea. So, So as Andrea was pointing out with this slide, sort of talking about all these different ways that we deliver stories, whether that's face-to-face, whether that's with an email or a letter, maybe it's with a phone call. The reason that we have this arrow here on the side is that we have proven in fundraising, which is, you know, a discipline that people now go to school for. It's a discipline, though, that lots of people can pick up through using free sources online or through different books. I'm an old-fashioned book girl myself. I like to read some of these books. And one of the things that we know through a lot of research is that the most powerful way to raise money is to have a face-to-face conversation among two people who know each other. And this is why we put so much emphasis on board and volunteers bringing their connections to the table. This is also why tours can be really powerful, where events can be really powerful when they are not so much where they're both about, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but the events when they are really about bringing people together to support a cause. So not just an event where we're going to listen to a great musician and we're going to have tickets at the door, but an event where perhaps there's no tickets at the door, but everyone can come, they can hear that great musician, and there's a really compelling ask given by a board member or a member of the community about why it's important to support this cause. That face-to-face piece is very important. You'll see special events is lower because I was trying to make that distinction there. But all of those things that we can do with our board, our volunteers, ourselves, and the people who are already supporting us, the more that we can empower them as storytellers letting them know what our values are, how we achieve impact, what that impact means, and how people in our community are helping drive that impact. That type of story will bring more people to the table who are also eager to bring their own friends and family in. And I know that seems challenging, but at the same time, I've seen it work over and over and over again. And I'm seeing some of the questions coming in through the Q&A and chat that will make sure we get a lot of time to spend on, because we can talk about some practical solutions about how to solve for some of the problems that we see. This is what I think about every day. We call this sort of the sustainability loop. Somebody makes a gift, that gift leads to impact. You tell people about that impact and you communicate and involve them in that impact. And then they make another gift. And then that creates more impact. And then they get more involved in that impact. And it creates this circle. It's very time consuming to get a new donor. It is very efficient and also like heartwarming to keep that same donor so that they can see that their gift is making change. They're understanding what that means. They're given opportunities to tour, to volunteer, to come to a round table, to hear about the impact of the gift. And then they know that they're making that meaningful contribution that's creating that impact. And this loop is what we think about all the time when we think about how do we continue to keep people engaged. And as they're feeling more engaged, that's the magic that gets them to bring other people in, whether that's hosting an event in their home, whether that's posting something on Facebook. That loop is the thing that gets more and more people engaged and wanting to continue to support. So another key piece of that impact is this idea of metrics, this idea of what is it that you do? How do you choose things that show what you're doing works? And how do you prove that? So this is another one that could be a whole other webinar, but it's very important for you to think about what is the thing that your organization does and how can you prove that that's effective? And some of those things will be numeric, like the amount of people served, or perhaps an exit survey of participants showing that they gained new skills, that they gained new understanding. And some of those things will be more intangible, like storytelling, like participant quotes, like anonymous testimonials. All of those things will help to prove that the organization is having impact. Because as you can imagine, you're out there with so many causes. You personally are wanting to support so many causes. You're looking for an organization that, again, shares that value and that you trust they can deliver the impact. And that's really where metrics can help you out with that. Andrea, I'll pass it back over to you.
Yeah, just a simple slide. Again, to come back to, are you doing this with the impact work? No matter what impact you have, to be able to speak to the heart and let the head follow is always an important thing to do. Weave that into a narrative somehow, and it will have that kind of lasting impact in telling something that people then think, all right, I'm going to do a next action, whatever you would suggest that I can do. That's the way to kind of frame that evaluative or that data information that can sometimes be a bit cold or a bit, just information without a story behind it.
Andrea, just before we move on from this slide, I'm wondering if you can talk for a second about how you work systems change into this impact scenario.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. And I think that's where a lot of organizations that do justice-based work or social justice work tend to find themselves a little stretched and having difficulty because they don't bring it necessarily to an individual level. And I think there's a few ways that you can do it. Their effectiveness will be something that needs to be tested, I think, with an audience or with a group of people who might already be kind of ready to give and ready to listen to the story that you have to tell. But I think that something that really helps is if you can break it down, that big systemic change that needs to happen, into what it means for an individual person on a day-to-day basis. Canadian Women's Foundation often is doing that when we talk about out of violence, out of poverty, into confidence, into leadership. we often are speaking about big systemic issues that need to shift. So it's about speaking to what an individual is doing, then quickly bringing it into what does this mean for everybody? This individual is just an example of the way the system is that makes it very difficult for people to get what they need, get the rights and respect that they deserve. And then what's the action? And for our case, the action would be, for instance, giving so that these great programs can get the support they need to keep going and work on an individual level, work on a community level, work on a societal level. So going up on those levels of the social ecological model, I guess. So that's kind of an example of how we do it. I feel like it is a challenge. It's a genuine challenge, and it's not something that is going to be solved right away. But I think that as more organizations start to tell this individual to big story to back to your action that you take, as more organizations do this, I think perhaps people who are in a giving position will listen to stories differently. It's also about training people to listen differently, think about that individual, but then also be able to zoom out and see the bigger picture as well. Thanks for asking the question, Suzanne.
Thanks, Andrea. So just one last slide. This is a recipe that we often use when we are creating very specific kinds of storytelling, in particular written formats. So this could be a good structure for a proposal or for a page on a website or for a mini campaign. But essentially the first thing that you want to outline is the problem in the community, then the solution that your organization has, and why the donor should be interested in your solution. So what is it about the solution your organization has that that donor could be interested in? And spoiler, that's generally values. That's generally, this is how we're trying to solve that problem. The next part of a proposal is about how the program works and its results for participants and its results for the community. Here's one thing that I've learned after 15 years, the how is not that important to people. And I know that's devastating because that's what we do all day is think about the how. Most folks out there who aren't involved in nonprofits are thinking about what's the results, what's the impact. So you can be very light on the how with most donors. There's always the few exceptions that want to go deeper in that, but light on the how and heavier on the impact. What is it doing for participants? What is it doing in the community? How is it driving systems change? That aspect of it. Then you want those other trust enforcing things like who your partners are, any credentials that you have, that could be how long you've been around, that could be great partnerships that you've fostered. That's any of those kinds of credentials. Then some financial information. This is the part where they've now got their heart attached. They need to see further ahead. What does it cost to run this? What does this look like? And this is not detailed. This is sort of 2 or 3 line, high level budget, just to show how money works, because there are those myths out there that somehow charities are making a lot of money delivering services, and we all know that's not true. So a little budget that shows how that money is getting to impact is very important. Then you want to outline very clearly how the potential donor can help. That could be a gift of $1,000 for 3 years means that we'll be able to continue delivering this great program. You might be in a position where you can say every $500 sends 1 more participant into the program, whatever that looks like. That's a big challenge for us. So we think about those ways to bring people into that conversation. Then it's a little bit about recognition. It's a little bit about, we'll pitch a story to the local newspaper, or we'll list your donation on the website, something like that. I'll say the recognition piece doesn't drive a lot of donors, but it shows that you are thinking about it and you're thinking about them. So it's more about showing you acknowledge them and want to celebrate them than it is about making sure you can put plaques up on places. Most people don't really care about that. They just want to know that you're thinking about that. Then at the very end, usually on our back page, is a little bit more about the organization. And again, that sounds counterintuitive because we think about our organization as the most important thing. For a donor, the most important thing is the impact. So you want to center that. The about you kind of goes at the end of it. And thinking about it in that way, thinking about how the donor is reading this is really important. So always thinking about what's the most important thing for them to learn out of this, and what's the most important thing that they're going to connect with will really help make sure that those proposals are read in a way that works for you. I think we're going to stop there. As you can imagine, Andrea and I can talk about this all day long for hours, or sometimes we do. So I think we'll stop there and move over to question and answer, so that we can solve some of the questions and problems that are out there for us.
Great. Thank you so much. There we go. Thank you so much, Andrea and Suzanne. That's really generating a lot of thought, I think, from our audience. And so we've had some questions come in, and I encourage other folks to put their thoughts in as well. The first question we have for you is related to your discussion about board and those closest to you, board members. So how do you deal with board members that are reluctant to engage in fundraising, whether they're giving their own dollars and they're feeling like they don't have that capacity to give, or they're reaching out to others and asking them to give, and they're reluctant to be fundraisers, especially from individuals, asking a person to person for that? How can an organization foster buy-in from those board members, volunteers, staff, etc.?
That's a great question, and it's always everyone's first question. So the first thing to know is that this is a long-term relationship. So don't expect dynamics to change overnight. But there's certain things that you can do that will help lay the groundwork to help board members feel more comfortable. The first thing to do is to think about stewardship as a way to engage your board. So there's lots of parts of fundraising that aren't about asking for money. And there's a huge part of fundraising that is about thanking and displaying impact. So one of the things that we do at the foundation is actually ask our board members on National Philanthropy Day, which is November 15th, to do thank you calls. So we ask them each to call 10 people and leave a voicemail or talk to them as a board member to say, thank you so much for your support. And you can do this at any time of year. Donors always love it. You provide a little script. You don't provide it too much personal detail about that donor, just the name, the amount, and then you encourage your board members to share stories back. And that gets them a little bit more comfortable with the idea of who donors are. Because most of the time, your board has this idea that donors are some other animal over here and not people just like you and me. And so this helps make it much more comfortable. The next thing that you start to do is talk to the board about giving. Because, and this is a true fact, and it's very important to convey this to your board, many donors ask, is your board all giving? Because that to them as a donor helps them know that that organization is trusted by the people who are closest to it. So that means you can ask board members to make a gift of whatever amount is comfortable for them so that your board is achieving 100% giving. So that could be, as I said, a $5 monthly gift. That could be a one-time gift of $25. That could be more based on what that board member's capacity is. It doesn't have to be a giant gift. We're not recruiting board members because of their ability to give. We're recruiting because they're really great in the community. And as we show deep appreciation for gifts of any size, it again makes them feel more comfortable. As you go through this, and this is like a 2 to 3 year process. So, this is not an overnight thing, but as you go through this, you're going to start to find board members who put their hands up more and say, yeah, I'll go to this event and talk about your work. Yeah, I'll sign a direct mail letter from you. And you start to learn who your champions are. And those champions work as peers with the rest of the board to show that it's easy and it's not terrible. And you can bring your book club to a tour, and you can, put a poster up in your local coffee shop. It doesn't have to be, it's not everything is high stakes. There's lots of gentle ways for people to get involved. And that will help foster that trust with those board members. It's also important to make sure that part of the terms of reference for board is that they're giving at a level that's comfortable for them. And a good way that I do that is to ask board members to think of the 3 places that they financially support as donors. And we want to be in the top 3. So we want our board members, we want to be in the top 3 of our board members. So if that means they generally give, $10 to their kids' school and $15 to a food bank, then we're thinking about a $10 or $15 gift. If that means that they're giving $10,000 to their alumni association, we want to be around that same level. And we let those board members set the tone for what that gift could look like. Andrea, do you have anything you want to add there?
No, I think the only thing I would add is just that leadership matters. And so when your leaders do something, even at a level that might not seem like a groundbreaking amount of money or a groundbreaking kind of action, but when they're able to say, you know what, I gave the bit that I could give, and I really believe in this organization, it does set you up to be able to tell that story that, hey, this person believes in us, you can believe in us too, and we can believe in each other together about the change we can make.
Just one other little thing that I'm going to say, because Andrea has been doing this with our board and it's been very effective, is make sure every board meeting has a storytelling, so that somebody is coming to each board member to say, hey, this is what we were able to do last month. This is what we were able to achieve. And it helps the board have that heart connection as well.
Amazing. Thank you for that answer. We have another question, and I'm consolidating a couple folks that asked this. Sexual assault centers. This might be difficult to tell a story around. People get uncomfortable around sexual violence. There's this legacy of victim blaming, or maybe you don't want your name associated with donating to a sexual assault center. This is tricky. What should they do around storytelling for sexual assault centers or sexual violence?
Andrea, do you want to start on this one?
Yeah, I can start, and please add in, Suzanne. I think this is a very important and difficult question for anything that has such social stigma and taboo related around it. So sexual violence is a very kind of common one that people feel that taboo, but there are other ones as well too, other issues that people might feel that way as well. I think about harm reduction work, and I think about supporting people in addictions and mental health. And I know, Suzanne, you have a background in that as well too. I think that there are ways that you can speak to this without speaking to a personal story and a personal experience. I think it's very important to do around being careful around trauma porn, as people sometimes call it, around exploiting people's personal traumas and pains. And I think about, I saw a rape crisis center do storytelling around the people who supported a fundraising initiative. So they focused on the givers, and they focused on why the givers cared. And the givers themselves did have experiences. Yes, they didn't speak in any particular detail about it. They spoke to why they cared, why the personal experience led them to give later on. And this one stayed with me. I probably heard this 20 years ago, but this stayed. There was a group of a motorcycle group of women who rode around the place and did cool things on motorcycles. And they got together and they gave to this sexual violence organization because they themselves experienced gender-based violence, and they also knew what it was like to be on the road by themselves at night and feel at risk. Some folks were Indigenous and had the experience in their community of missing and murdered Indigenous women in their community and the pain of that. So they were able to speak to things that impacted them on a community level, impacted them on a safety level, without getting into the personal story in a way that was difficult for them personally. So I give that specific example to say that there's lots of ways of speaking to stories that don't have to be the personal negative experience, painful experience, where you're getting into the areas that really are not okay to try to monetize or fundraise around. So think about that if you're thinking around gender-based violence, and what are the stories around. And certainly the Canadian Women's Foundation is thinking about that, the people who support, the people who help, the people who make a difference in their community on this issue that's so taboo. Suzanne, throw it over to you.
Yeah, I think one of the things I just want to pick up on, Andrea, and that great example was finding people who share similar values. So look at who's organizing what in your community and see if you can connect, see if you can send a speaker to one of their events. We have some wonderful partnerships with groups like the Society of Beer Drinking Ladies, the Girly Book Club. We know these are groups that value gender justice, and they may not be as concerned about being linked to a stigmatized topic because they've already been open about their concern around that, open about how important that is to them. So find those natural communities in your community, and it'll be very wonderful to connect with people who share those values and see what they're able to do to amplify the work that you're doing. And that will also help you know how to talk about these issues. And I just want to point out, Andrea mentioned mental illness. I worked for a mental illness hospital for about 10 years. And when I started, almost every donor was anonymous because of that stigma around, like, what will people think if I'm giving to a mental illness hospital? What we learned over those 10 years is stigma is something we can overcome. And we want to learn from that and bring that to other stigmatized issues, because stigma is what actually causes so much of the harm. And the more that we can help our donors feel like they are creating social change through their giving, through attaching their name, through talking openly about things, the more that they will feel that they're doing more than giving. They're truly involved as advocates and as champions and as partners. And that's a really powerful dynamic.
Thank you both so much. I'm going to insert a short question we got in the chat box here because I think Andrea partially answered it. If you're doing that type of work and you want to speak to the voices of the folks you're serving and you want to quote them or share their story, how do you keep them anonymous, or how do you share stories that preserve anonymity and safety? And I think you spoke to it a little bit, but maybe you could give us some more tips and tricks.
Yeah, really great question. First of all, I would ground it on the person themselves. Ask them what they would be comfortable with. Of course, try to even pay an honorarium, something small, for their time and for their energy and the fact that they're sharing something perhaps difficult. That always helps. And I think as well too, there's lots of ways of just basically saying that this person, if they're comfortable with this, say that this person didn't want to use their name, but they wanted to share their story with you because they felt it was important. You can be frank with that. I think it's really important to, even if it's a stigmatized issue or it's a difficult issue, to have that as part of the storytelling and the cadence of what you're saying. Be like, nobody talks about this stuff. And nobody even feels like they can share this, but we have this wonderful person who really wanted to share something with you. We're going to use this name that they asked us to use, and we're going to, share their story with you. And this is what they're asking for help for, or this is what they feel will make a difference for them and people like them. Make it as part of the kind of, I think, the inherent honesty of the story, and it will actually make a big difference, I think, for realness and for feeling like, yeah, you're part of a community here. Other people, let's talk about house people versus outside people. House people, you just say it frankly, you just say it how you need to say it. Outside people, you're like kind of positioning. It's great if you can build up your base and build up the people you're speaking to so they all feel like house people. They're all your house people. You can be frank and say, yeah, this person didn't want to use their name because, trust me, this is a hard one, but they really want to share this information with you.
That's great. So not shying away from saying it's anonymous, but being really upfront about it, which is great. A practical question here. What if what you want to fundraise for is wages for your staff or administrative costs? That's a tricky thing in the charity and non-for-profit world. What if your donor dollars are going to pay someone?
Yeah, they should. That's part of what our services are. For so many organizations, our number one cost is staff costs. That's therapists, that's settlement workers, that's all of that. And we shouldn't be embarrassed about that. I'll tell you from the large organization perspective, one of the things that larger organizations do is actually put a surcharge on any gift that's specifically for a program to say this is going to support the overall operations. So somewhere in like Sick Kids or the University of Vancouver or sorry, University of Victoria, they do about a 10 to 15% charge on that. And like I said, the big places get lots of gifts. We can follow some of their lead and feel just as unapologetic about that in our own work. And it's very like, try not to say admin costs or fundraising costs. These are your core costs. When you break it down, say things like this is our rent, our electricity, delivering therapy services, doing that. Try to be more descriptive about what those costs are doing, because everyone understands that it takes money to keep the lights on. And there are narratives out there where we'll see like Ronald McDonald House or Tim Hortons saying 100% of this goes directly to the program. That's not true, because the company is underwriting all the staff costs. So there's no such thing out there as 100% of the dollars go to the participant or to that programming. And we shouldn't keep perpetuating that myth. We should feel confident that this is how we deliver services, and delivering services is filling a vital community need. So it's about how you say it, and know that it's according to the Canada Revenue Agency, looking at like 30% admin is completely acceptable. And that is not even the salaries of people who are delivering services. That's just like core operations costs. And so you'll see sometimes organizations saying, like, according to the CRA, 30% is acceptable and we're at 10. This is amazing. You can also break some of this down in pie charts. You can show different things. I'm going to walk back. This is amazing for a second, because I do think that the race to the bottom on admin costs is challenging and not doing a good service to the work that we all do. But that's, changing the conversation from what's the admin to what's the impact is very important. And it's very okay for us to be confident and comfortable about that.
Yeah, and I'll just add there, I think that was really well said. Thank you, Suzanne. I think this is an area for systemic change and advocacy. A lot of organizations, we all need to be in the conversation of why we change this capitalist mindset, that somehow change can happen with zero money. That's not the case at all. And it's not evil to spend money on systemic change efforts, from the individual to community to policies and practices. So anytime that our organizations can get together on this, it's very powerful.
Amazing. Thank you both. Quick question. All the advice you shared today, is that only for charities and charities with a registration number, or does it work for not-for-profits?
The only real difference between charities and not-for-profits, and there's no even real legal difference, it's all in what we call ourselves. Some organizations can give tax receipts, some can't. That's really the only difference. The way to talk about things is the same. The impact focus is the same. The way to engage people is the same. When you're not able to give a tax receipt, that's generally because you're doing work that's different than what the charity model is. And there could be really good reason for that. So be excited about telling people those reasons. We know that the charitable system that we have in Canada needs some work, and that there's a lot of gaps there. And here's one thing to just think about, like, people can do whatever they want with their money. I give to charities, I give to crowdfunding, I give to GoFundMes, I give to all sorts of things. And we see consistently that tax receipt is a very low motivation for people to give. And in fact, it doesn't actually work out to be much of a benefit to a lot of people. So it's not the primary driver. The only thing that you want to think about if you're a nonprofit is what's the extra ways that we can demonstrate trust, because we don't have that same CRA oversight. What are the other ways that we can demonstrate trust? And that could be through providing more financials, more partnerships, more information around that, but there's no strategy.
Perfect. Thank you, Suzanne. That's really helpful. My next question is maybe more for Andrea. So is there a certain format to go about telling the story of your foundation? Is there a template we can follow? How do we talk about, I know it's, Suzanne said, put it on the back of the website, that About Us page. But how do we do it once we get that page set up?
What a great question. I hesitate to give a blanket formula because I think it is different for different people. But if you think about going from the heart first to the head, and then to the boring stuff that people might need to know to go forward, anything I see is kind of structured in that pyramid way. So you start with the smallest kind of most digestible impact, most digestible piece of the story. So I did this, or I met this person, or this happened to me. Then you go to the next level. What does this mean on a little bit of a bigger basis? That's where you can introduce the idea of intervention. What is what you've done as an organization done to change this or make this better? Then you go into the kinds of boring, my head is saying I should be paying attention to financial stuff. And I say it's boring because it's really not what's going to hook anybody, but it is essential. And then down to action, always some kind of action that I can take. It may not be a donation action. It might be a read more action, learn more, sign up for this, tell one person, share social media, whatever. I find that that format tends to be somewhat universal. You'll see it in emails. You'll hear it in people when they're doing like oral storytelling and presentations. You'll see it in videos sometimes. You'll see it on web pages. So that kind of a structure, I think, is pretty winning. But again, know your audience, know what they would need. There might be tweaks that make a difference. So yeah, I say that with all the caveats.
That's great. Okay, we have about 60 seconds left, 120 seconds left. We've got 2 minutes. Quick and easy question. How can folks watching today connect with your expertise? So can they email you or the foundation? Yeah, great. And that was my quickest question. And I'm sorry to everyone that I couldn't get to every single question that came in, but I hope that if you watch back the recording or you send a note, you'll get those questions answered. I don't know if you can answer this one in 1 minute, but what do we do about those traditional donors that have been giving in the same way the whole time to the same, the same causes? How do we bring them along as we talk about systems change rather than their typical old school messaging?
Yeah, I think it's the phrase I often think about is meet people where they're at. So talk to them where they are today, whether that is, I want to help this one woman get a job, right? So talk to them about, we can help this one woman get a job, but also, why is it that she couldn't? So let that curiosity be the second part of it. So be comfortable with meeting people where they're at. Some folks are going to still be, there's so many kinds of humans out there. Everyone is motivated by their own constellation of values. Meet people where they're at and give them opportunities to hear different perspectives. I like to think a lot about not educating people, but curating an experience for them. So what's that little thing that would give them the light bulb moment of, wait, there's actually an injustice underneath this. Like, she tried to leave, but the police didn't help. The police didn't do this. What's the injustice underneath this? And that will help open that up just a little bit. But there's other folks, wonderful. They continue to support you. That's great. And for those who want to go a little bit further, you give them those little moments where they can start to get curious and research things themselves or ask you questions, but you want to create this space.
What a wonderful note to end on. Meet them where they're at and then plant that curiosity. That's great. And it goes back to what you talked about with trust and the sustainability loop. I love that. I hope everybody took some notes. I know I did. It was great listening to you both today. I want to be respectful of everybody's time that's been here. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our many interpreters. thank you for everybody that showed up as an attendee, taking this time, because I know you're all learning more so that you can do more to make our society better and to make tomorrow brighter. So we really appreciate that. Reminder, look for the recording and please fill out that survey. It helps us have better webinars. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.